Go to the bottom where it says report.
Where is it saying?
Um, see where it says here. Pause, stop. It's not on recording.
Hmm?
No, not that. The one next to it. The two line recording.
Okay, how it goes. We're going to be learning now in the Sikha of the Rebbe that's printed in the Sikha Chelik Lamed Dalet Parsha Shoftim. It's one of the Sikhas that is being learned by the project Tutal Kent. And what I will do is I will not learn the Sikha inside. What I will do is I will just say the Nakuda of the Sikha and then add some of the words, some things from the Ha'oris, and maybe just a few other words to add to some of the points of the Sikha. The first thing I'm going to do is read the Lashon of the Rambam. But the Sikha is, the Rebbe explains the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchas Malachim Pedik Yud Aleph. And I'm going to read the Lashon of the Rambam the way the Rebbe brings it down in the Sikha, and bring the kashas that the Rebbe asks, and then give the Nakuda of the Teretz, and then I'll go through some of the other points. The Rambam writes like this: HaMelech HaMashiach Osid Lamed Ulahach Ze Malchus V'Izdovet Liyeshno. Melech HaMashiach is going to come and bring back the kingship, the kingdom of David HaMelech, the way it was originally. And then the Rambam says, "V'chol misheina mamim bei, and misheina machakel b'yosei." Anybody who doesn't believe in him, in other words, it means that Mashiach doesn't believe Mashiach is going to come, or someone that doesn't wait for his coming. Leib he's not only denying in the words of the rest of the other Nevi'im, because that's for sure. In the Nevi'im, as the Rambam says further, we find a lot of things about Mashiach. So that's for sure that if someone doesn't believe in Mashiach, doesn't believe in what the words of the Nevi'im, what the Nevi'im said. But now the Rambam is saying that if he doesn't believe in Mashiach, that Mashiach will come, or he doesn't wait for Mashiach's coming, not only does he not believe in what it says in the Nevi'im, Ela b'Torah b'Moshe Rabbeinu, he also denies, he doesn't believe in the Torah, which means in Chumash and in Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Sharei HaTorah idol, because the Torah means Chumash testify that Mashiach will come, and therefore someone doesn't believe in that, doesn't believe in the Torah, which was written, came from the Eibishter, and it came through Moshe Rabbeinu. Where do we see it in the Torah? Shnamar, it says a pasuk, Parshat Nitzavim, Hashem will come and make your captives return, and he'll gather you from wherever you are. Even if you'll be kicked away, pushed away someplace, the end of Shemaim is the other end of the world. Hashem will bring you back. This means the Geula. It means that there will be a Geula, that all the Yidden will come back to Eretz Yisrael. And that's a pasuk in Chumash. And these things which are written clearly in the Torah, this includes all the words that were said by the Nevi'im. Even though the Nevi'im went to them in more details, but it's all included in what the Torah says here, that there will be a Geula, that the Yidden will come back, that it's Yisrael, the Eibishter will gather all the Yidden back. Then the Rambam brings another place in the Torah where we find about Mashiach. Ave Parshas Bilam Namar, in Parshas Bilam, which is merely Parshas Bolak, but it's a Parsha that talks about Bilam. There it says, V'shom Niba, V'shnei Mashiach. There, Bilam prophesied about two Mashiachs. The Mashiach Harishon Shu David, the first Mashiach, which is David, the Mashiach Achron, and the last Mashiach, She'emen Bibona, who's going to get up, come from descent and being a descendant of David HaMelech. And then the Rambam brings different psuki in the Nevuah of Bilam, where the way the Rambam explains it, they refer to part of Benegei David HaMelech and Benegei Melech HaMashiach at Mashiach. So here we have another place in the Torah where it talks about Mashiach. Then in the next halacha, this was halacha Aleph of Perek Yud Aleph. The next halacha, which is halacha Beis, the Rambam continues. He brings another ayah from the Torah, from Chumash, about Mashiach. Abor Miklat Oemer, it says concerning all the Miklat. All the Miklat are the cities of refuge. So concerning the cities of refuge, the Torah says, and that's in Parsha Shoftim, Im Yarchiv Hashem Elokecha es Gvulcha, when Hashem is going to broaden your borders, that means you will have Eretz Yisrael again, and even bigger than it was before. We shall add another 3 cities of refuge, which means when the Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael through Yeshua the first time, they had to set aside 6 cities of refuge, 6 miklot. And what the Pasuk says here, when the Eibishter will broaden Eretz Yisrael, which means he will give us back Eretz Yisrael in a way that it'll be even bigger than before. And what does it mean bigger than before? Because when the Eibishter promised Avram Avinu that he'll give Eretz Yisrael to Avram's children, he mentions the land of 10 nations. The Pel Mamish, when the Eden got Eretz Yisrael, it was only the land of 7 nations. There are 3 other nations that we never got. The Pasuk refers to it in the Haftocha, the promise to Avram Avinu, calls it Keni, Knizi, Vikatmeni, which is Amen, Meyav, and Edom. That we never got. And what he's saying here, when you will get Eretz Yisrael back and bigger, so then you will have to add 3 more cities of refuge. And the Rambam says, it's never happened yet. And like Hashem would not command something in vain for no reason. So if it didn't happen yet, it probably is going to happen, which means that the Pasuk is telling us that they will have the Gula again and we'll get Eretz Yisrael back again. And that's another raya from the Torah that we will have a Geula, which means we will get Eretz Yisrael back and the union of Mashiach will be there. Then the Rambam adds, considering the words of the Nevi'im of the prophets, you don't even have to prove it. All the Svarim of the Nevi'im are full of this union of Mashiach. So the Rebbe, as he does it a lot of times, but again, Rashi, other things, that if the Rashi, but in this case it's the Rambam who brings more than one raya to a certain union, there must be a need for all the rayas. Here the Rambam brings 3 rayas from Chumash about Mashiach. So obviously each raya itself is not enough, and you have to have the other rayas. And that's why he brings 3. So the Rebbe asks, why does the Rambam need all 3 rayas? Why do we need a second raya? The raya from the Nevuah of Bilam. Why is not enough the first raya where the Pasuk says clearly that Hashem will bring back the captives, which means Hashem will bring the Yidden back to Eretz Yisrael. So the Rebbe says, because in the Pasuk, V'shav Hashem Alekecha, the first raya, it just speaks about the Geula. We will come back. The Yidden will come back. There will be a Geula, redemption. It doesn't say anything about Mashiach, meaning there will be a human being who will be the king, he will be Mashiach, and he will bring the Geula, etc., etc. It doesn't say that. So the Rambam brings the second raya because there it talks about a person Mashiach. In the Nevuah of Bilam, the way he says it doesn't say outright, but the way he says the psukim, for instance, Dorach Kechet Miyankiv will come, a star from Yankiv. Anyway, that goes on Mashiach, on a person. So the second raya helps something that the first raya doesn't have, that it also tells us about the person Melech HaMashiach. But then you have a question. Then let him bring just a second raya and doesn't need a first, because here we have more than the first. The Rebbe says, no, there is something more in the first over the second. That's why we need the first one also. Because the second one is not clear. It's in Nevuah of Bilam, but Bilam said it in the form of riddles. It was not mefurish. The Rambam says that it's mefurish in the Torah. It's obvious, clearly in the Torah about Mashiach. That we find in the first raya. The first raya is clear that the Yidden will come back to Eretz Yisrael. Hashem will bring it back. That's exactly what it says, mefurish. So if you only bring the second raya, it wouldn't be something that's mefurish. So it brings the first raya also, which is Dovim Mefurish. So we understand that Rebbe says why we need both rayas. But the question is, why do we need the third raya? What does the third raya gain that the other 2 rayas don't have? Also, the Rebbe asks, why did the Rambam write the third raya in a separate halacha? The first 2 rayas are in one halacha, and the third raya is in another halacha. L'chura, if the Rambam would write every raya in a separate halacha, it would be fine. That's maybe he wants to make every raya separately. If he would bring all rayas in one halacha, but also because it's all one idea, bringing rayas. But to bring 2 rayas in one halacha and the third raya in a separate halacha, that's something strange. Why did the Rambam do it? So the Rebbe explains, and I'll just say over the Nakuda Bekitzer, very short, that the raya Bora Miklat adds something very, very special. By bringing this raya, we look at the pasuk and the Rambam brings B'negei Miklat. This union of Mashiach that's hinted here, because it says that we will get that Eretz Yisrael back and Eretz Yisrael will be even wider than before, is part of a mitzvah. The union of Orei Miklot, of setting aside cities of refuge, is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. Now, the union of Mashiach is part of the mitzvah. Part of the mitzvah of Orei Miklot is that there will be a time when Eretz Yisrael will be back to us and it'll be bigger. We'll have to have 3 more cities of Orei Miklot. So by doing that, it's a part, it's a condition in one of the mitzvahs of the Torah. That means like this, even though the union of Mashiach is written in the Torah, as the Rambam says clearly, nevertheless, it's not part of a mitzvah. We don't find a mitzvah that a person has to believe in Mashiach. No mitzvah like it. You have to believe in it anyway because it says in the Torah. So everything it says in the Torah is true, and you have to believe it. But it's not part of a mitzvah. But by the case of Orei Miklot, it became part of a mitzvah. It's a part of a mitzvah of Orei Miklot. So if someone denies the end of Mashiach, doesn't just deny something that's written in the Torah. Facts that the Torah gives, which is wrong. You're a kafir if you're denying what the Torah says. But here it's denying in a mitzvah. What's the mile if you're doing, by doing that, you're denying in a mitzvah? The word is because that is something that's eternal. The Rambam says here in Hilchos Malachim and in Hilchos Shuvah, this is the Lashon the Rambam says. Dover boreru mefurish b'Torah. This is in Hilchos Yisei, not in Hilchos Shuvah, Hilchos Yisei Torah. Rambam says, Dover boreru mefurish b'Torah. There's a clear thing in the Torah. She mitzvah emedes la'elam ol elamim. This is a mitzvah that stands forever. Ein lo loy shinui v'lei geroi v'lei teisves. There's no changes, there's no subtraction, and there's no addition. And he's talking about a mitzvah. A mitzvah means a commandment of the Torah. And this is something that we have to do forever, the Rambam says. And in Hilchos Malachim, he also writes the same idea. Iker advarim kochaheng, this is the main thing. Sha'Torah azeis, chukeo mishpatel. The Torah, the chukim and the mishpatim, which are the laws. La'elam ul elam elamim forever. They may sifin alayim, but they get him hand. You can't add, you can't take off. Anybody who adds or takes off from the mitzvahs, a shagila upon him b'Torah, or he's learning false interpretation of the Torah. And he takes out the words of the mitzvahs, from the simple meaning of the mitzvahs. For sure, this guy is, whoever does that is a badoi, a liar, and a rosha, and an apikeres. And we all know that what he meant here was, he meant Esaish, he meant Yoshker, who came and said that now on the Torah, you don't have to keep the Torah. So on him, the Rambam says he's a, for sure, vadai, a badoi, a rosha, and apikeres. So now by being, in the Mashiach, being part of the mitzvah of Orei Miklot, so just like the mitzvah of Orei Miklot is a mitzvah which stays forever and it can't change, so too the concept of Mashiach is something that's forever and it can't change. And that's why the Rambam says that when he brings the Raya of Orei Miklot, he says, Hashem did not command us in vain. Sivo, it doesn't say Hashem didn't say something in vain. He didn't command us something, because here we're talking about specifically about a mitzvah, that the mitzvah of Orei Miklot is going to happen, and it's connected to Mashiach, because it'll be when Mashiach will come, when we'll get Eretz Yisrael back. So the union of Mashiach became part of a tzivu, and that cannot be in vain. That cannot be in vain because the mitzvah is forever. What is the mile of a mitzvah? Who cares if it's a mitzvah or not? It's in the Torah. We know the Torah is nitzchi. Everything in the Torah is forever. So what's the mile if we say that it's part of a mitzvah in the Torah? Why is a mitzvah different? So the Rebbe explains it at length. This is what the Rebbe goes on to explaining. First of all, when it comes to a promise of the Eibishter in the Torah, or the promise of the Eibishter, there is a possibility, chas v'sholom, that the promise won't come true. And there are different conditions when, we're not going to repeat all the details, but it's possible that it should not come true. Now, how could it be Hashem promise? How could it not come true? Sometimes it's possible that we do something and don't deserve that promise should be fulfilled. We find it by Yaakov Avinu. When Yaakov Avinu left Eretz Yisrael to go to Choron, Hashem on the way promised him that he's going to protect him from Esav. When he was going back, he davened to the Eibishter, asking him to protect him from Esav. And Rasha explains, why did he ask to protect? Hashem promised him to protect. So Rasha says he was afraid, Shema Yigrem Achet. Maybe the sin, maybe he sinned. Maybe niskalkul v'chet, maybe he ruined himself, maybe he ruined it for himself by doing Avedas. The Eibishter take a promise, but if you don't deserve it, the Eibishter might not give you. So therefore he davened again and asked the Eibishter to protect him. So what do we see from here? That sometimes the Eibishter promises, and the Torah is written that this will happen, and it could Maisa come b'peil, it will not happen. We'll find it in another way also, when we even said in the Shir, Ad Yarvai Amcha Hashem Ad Yavarem Zukanisa. So the Chazal say that what this was saying, and this was like, they were saying it at the Shira, they knew the Eibishter promised that just like he made Nisim, when they went out of Mitzrayim, going to Eretz Yisrael, the Eibishter will make also the same Nisim when they will second time, later on, go into Eretz Yisrael by the second time when they went in through Ezra. The bottom line, it didn't happen, because they did not deserve it. Whatever the reason is, but they did not deserve it. So we see there is a possibility that the Eibishter promises, and It will not come true. So one person might say that in Enoch it says in the Torah that the Eibush promised Mashiach will come, but maybe it will not come true. That's one problem that we'll have, even if it says in the Torah. Then there's another thing. We say everything in the Torah is nitzchi, is forever. But when we say everything in the Torah is forever and it will be true forever, it's possible sometimes that it doesn't mean literally. It doesn't mean kipshutes, literally. For instance, all the stories in the Torah about Avraham and all the other stories are all nitzchi. Everything in the Torah is forever. What does that mean? Physically, it's nitzchi. No, it's not. Avraham Avinu, the Maisa happened with him years ago. The lesson that we take from it, the idea of it, the holiness of it, everything is nitzchi. But the actual thing to happen is not necessarily, things are not, they're not forever. They're just not kipshute, but Yeruchni is there, but not kipshute forever. So the same thing one might say, maybe what the Torah tells us about Mashiach is beruchnius. It's going to happen because the Torah says so, but maybe it's a beruchnius going to happen. How do we know it means begashmius? Now, it's wrong. We know that the Torah means a begashmius. But will someone be an apikaris if someone says, I believe it's going to be beruchnius? Because there are some things that are nitzchi beruchnius. So it's possible for a person to come to say that the truth is, it really literally will not happen. It's going to be only beruchnius. Therefore, the Rambam brings that this is part of a mitzvah. By a mitzvah, there is two things. By a mitzvah has to be, and has to be begashmius. A mitzvah cannot be beruchnius. That's what the Rambam says. Anybody, the lotion of the Rambam was, as I mentioned before, anybody, anybody who adds or subtracts from or says a wrong interpretation in Torah, and he took out the mitzvahs from their simple meaning. Mitzvahs is simple meaning, because otherwise somebody could come and say, maybe the mitzvah of film, for instance, is also not begashmius. Everyone knows that there are ruchnis dikiyonim in film. Maybe what the Torah says is a ruchnis dikiyonim in film. But film doesn't mean begashmius. That's a big applicatus. Mitzvahs are kipshuton. Mitzvahs cannot be beruchnis in every mitzvah. Otherwise, you can say every mitzvah like that. We know for sure that the mitzvahs are poshet kipshuti. The way it's written, you got to do it. You got to keep Shabbos simply. You got to get matzah pesach, physical matzah. That's what mitzvahs are. So the Rambam here comes and says that what I'm telling you is that the inyan of Mashiach is part of a mitzvah. It's not just a promise, which maybe will not come true, because maybe we're not dating, which is possible in theory. And it also, you can't say that it's not begashmi, it's a ruchnis dikerinyan. Other things in the Torah could be ruchnis. Nitzkis. This is part of a mitzvah. And since it's part of a mitzvah, it's going to happen begashmius. That's the mila of this raya. So when we ask the question, why does the Rambam read the third raya? Because that you don't have from the other two. The other two raya, just one is a haftocha. In the posuk, the first raya, V'shov Hashem alakecha shvuscha, Hashem will bring back your captives, is a promise of Hashem. But we said the promise of Hashem could chas v'sholom not come true. Someone might say it won't come true because we're not deserving it. The second raya with the nevuah of Bilam, it's not part of a mitzvah. So if it's not part of a mitzvah, maybe it means a ruchnis dikinyonim. Comes the third raya, and the third raya tells us that this is something that definitely will happen because it's a mitzvah, and a mitzvah is real kipshute, and it'll happen kipshute, it'll happen simply the way it is. And that's the reason why the Rambam brings it in a separate halacha. The other two rayas are just one as something that the first one was missing, and the rayas for that's the meaning of Mashiach. This is to teach you not just the raya for the coming of Mashiach, to show you how true it is and the strictness of it as a separate concept. And that's why he makes it in a separate halacha. Then the Rebbe adds in his Medayek also another word. The Rambam, when he brings the raya from the Nevuah of Bilam, the Rambam uses a lotion, Bilam Nemar V'shom Niba B'shnei HaMashiachim. There it says, and he prophesied about the two Mashiachim. Why does the Rambam have to add the word he prophesied? Should have said, there it speaks about Mashiach, and that's part of what he says. And it's a Nevuah, but why does the Rambam have to stress that there he prophesied? So the Rebbe says, because there is a Maila in Nevuah also. And what the Rambam wants to tell us is that the union of Mashiach is not just a promise of the Eibishter. And not only we said it's part of Torah, part of a mitzvah in Torah, but besides that, it has another Maila. It's also part of Nevuah. What's the Maila of Nevuah? We know the Divrei Novi Words of Nevuah is a lower level than words of Torah. So what's the mile of the Divrei Novi? So the Rebbe explains that there is a chumre, something stricter, stronger, words of a Novi over the words of Torah. And the raya is that when it comes to doing an Avera against the Torah, not always is the punishment the same. Sometimes Chas v'Shalom, a person gets killed for it, something gets koras, it could be malchus, it could be lighter. There are different levels. What does that mean? That there are different levels of how strict the Avera is. You see it from the punishment. But when it comes to not listening to a Novi, makes no difference what he said. Anything that the Novi says, if you don't listen to him, even if it's not something that's a mitzvah, he just wants you to do something as a Novi, he tells you. You get misa by being killed by Hashem, misa b'dei shemayim, however it says with misa b'dei shemayim, you die at a certain age, etc., etc. Why is it that by a Novi, anything you go against a Novi is misa b'dei shemayim, while by going against Torah, it's not? So the Rebbe explains, because the strength of different Nevuah is like this. Nevuah is something that Eibishter speaks to people. The Lashon of the Rambam is, Hokel manaba es bnei ha'odam. Eibishter gives Nevuah to people. Or another Lashon, Mada shemagia ma'beira l'leib bnei odam. It's inyonim that come from the Beira, from the Creator, to the hearts of people. Since this is the concept of Hashem revealing himself to people, so when it comes to the people, what it's supposed to affect the people, that's something closer. See, Torah is more a general thing. About everyone is mechuyev to keep the Torah, and it's to everyone. But nevertheless, it's something general. This is something that David specifically lowered himself and came to people. So that has a chumre, the gaba divrei Torah. And therefore, if someone hears something from a Navi, which is specifically made to come down to people, it's stricter. So what the Rambam is trying to tell us, this fact that Mashiach is going to come is not only written in Torah as a promise and as part of Torah, and therefore anybody who doesn't believe it is not Bekeres. This is more than that, it's a mitzvah, and if you don't believe in the mitzvah, you tell that it's not Begashmias or it's not Nitzchi, that's the real Apikuros, and the person is called an Apikeres. The Rambam wants to add that this is not only that, this is also part of a Nevuah. So it has the Chumrah of Nevuah. So it comes out that the Rambam is trying to tell us that the inyan of Mashiach, that it's written in the Torah, in Chumash, we're not talking about the Nevi'im, als Nevi'im later, but even in Chumash, it has the inyan of promise of the Eibishter in Chumash. It's part of Torah of Chumash. It's part of a mitzvah that comes from Chumash. And it's even part of a nevuah that comes from Chumash. It has all the strictness, all the milas. But then there's only one thing to ask. The Torah wants to tell us the greatness of the truth of the coming of Mashiach, how important it is, and he puts it in the mitzvah. Why did the Torah put it in the mitzvah or a miklot? Why daft mitzvah or a miklot? Could have put it into any mitzvah to connect the union of Mashiach to a mitzvah which would have this importance of a mitzvah which cannot be changed and will come begashmias. Why is it by Oreh Miklot? So the Rebbe explains this is already al Pichsidis. What's Oreh Miklot? Oreh Miklot is a city of refuge, which means a place of protection from the Geil Adam. If someone killed somebody by mistake, the Shegig, so the next of kin, the Geil Adam, either has a right or should look to kill this person. And if you run to Oreh Miklot, you're protected. That's Oreh Miklot in place. We know there's space and time go together. So there is an Oreh Miklot in space to protect the person from the Geil Adam. There is Oreh Miklot in time. What's Oreh Miklot in time? In Zman. The Rambam refers to the coming of Mashiach. That time he calls it Eisei Azman. That time, this and this and this will be. What will be then? There'll be no hunger, and there'll be no competition, there'll be no fights, no war, no. All that is Eisei Azman. That time is a time of Oreh Miklot, so to speak. The word Miklot really means is contain. That's a Miklot. So it contains a person from the negative things of Golas, just like Oreh Miklot the Gashmias held the person and saved them from all the negative things of being in danger. That time will be protected from all the things that we have in Golas in danger, which are negative things like hunger and war, etc., etc., etc. That's why the future is called Oreh Miklot. And that's why when the Rambam wants to tell us about the future of time of Mashiach, connects it to Oreh Miklot. And then the Rebbe goes into Ruchnis and Yonim. We know that Oreh Miklot protection is not only protection, the Gashmias, it's also the Ruchnias. It says it's protection from the Yetzer Hora. The Yetzer Hora is the Geil Adam. He's the one that tries to harm a Yid. So it protects from the Yetzer Hora. The Gemara says, Divra Teira Keltin. Teira protects you. Protects you from what? From the Yetzer Hora. So just like in Gashmias, the Ore Mikla protected the person from the Geil Adam. But not only that, it also brought a kapora, forgiveness to the person for the Aveda he did. So too, the union of the coming of Mashiach at that time will be a protection from all the things of Golos. We won't have those things anymore. And it'll bring the greatest kapora to bring the Eden to the highest level. And that's why the Torah put the union of Mashiach to make the real strength of what the union of Mashiach is into the mitzvah of Ore Mikla. That's generally very vague, but generally the Nakuda of the Sikha. I just want to go through a few points in the Sikha, some things from the Ha'ara, some things to add to explain certain points. One point is that Rambam said, as we read in the beginning, that anybody who doesn't believe in him, or somebody who doesn't wait for his coming, is a kafir. He denies not only the Nevi'im, but in Torah, and Nevesh, etc., etc. Rambam doesn't say someone who doesn't believe in him and doesn't wait for him. He says someone doesn't believe in him or doesn't wait for him. That means you could be a person that believes in him but doesn't wait for him. And that unfortunately happens. A lot of people who believe in Mashiach, they know the Torah says so and they know Mashiach is going to come. But they're not necessarily waiting for him. They don't mind if he'll come a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. Everything that life is good and they don't necessarily feel it and need Mashiach. That's what the Rambam says. If you don't believe in him, or means even if you do, but you don't wait for him, you are a kafir, you deny in the Torah, Mesh, etc., etc. Why? If you believe in him, why are you a kafir? Because if you believe in him and you don't wait, you don't really believe in him. Because if you really would believe in him, in Mashiach, in the concept of Mashiach, really knowing what it is, it's impossible you shouldn't wait for it. Imagine someone will say to you, and you believe the person that he'll give you $100 million soon. You'll get it very soon. And you don't wait for it, so or you don't understand English, or you don't know what money means. You just don't understand what it means. But if you really understand what it is and you really believe what it is, then you'll have to wait for it. Unless you don't really believe what he's saying. So you might say you're believing, but you don't really, deep down in your heart, you don't. And that's what the Rambam says. If you don't believe in him, or you don't wait for him, it's also you don't believe. You are a kafir in Torah and Nemesh Rabbeinu. That's one nakuda I want to make. Another nakuda. Rebbe, the raya that the Rambam brings from Ore Miklot is because the pasuk says in Yarchiv Hashem Elakecha es Gvulcha, which means that when Hashem will widen your borders, you have to add 3 more cities of Ore Miklot, and it never happens. And the Torah would not say it, the Eibishter would not say it in vain. So it's going to happen. So obviously it's going to happen in the future. Now, if you look at the pasuk says Im Yarchiv Hashem Elakecha es Gvulcha. Now the word Im many times means if. So maybe the pshat is if Hashem will widen your borders, then you have more earning. But it doesn't mean it definitely will happen. If he'll do it, he'll do it. Then if I'll give you Eretz Yisrael back, then you'll have the bigger Eretz Yisrael, you have to have more Ore Miklot. But where do we see that it's going to happen? It says im. Now we know the truth is that im doesn't necessarily mean if. Sometimes im, more times it means if, but sometimes it means when. Im Yarchiv Hashem Elakecha as Gvulcha means when he will do it. Now, how do we know? Maybe it means im if. The whole Rambam's trying to say that it's clear in the Torah and the Raya. One of the Rayas is from, it says if Hashem will be marchivu, widen your borders. Maybe it doesn't mean him when. It means if. Now, this must be one of the places where it doesn't mean if. Other places also, Rashi says, and Chumash and Chazal say that im could mean when, not if. But here also, because when does it say im in the Torah meaning if? If it's dependent on the person, depending on something happening. It's not talking about Hashem. It says if you're let's say if you will go machukim, Hashem promises He'll give us reward. It's up to us. So Hashem uses the word im if. But when we're talking something that Hashem has to do, has nothing with us to do with us. Why would it be if? Hashem knows whether He'll do it or not. What do you mean there's a suffix? It's totally dependent on person. About that, Hashem knows everything that's going to happen. But we have choice. We have free choice and things that happen. Hashem made a world that some things might happen. It says like this week's parsha, if a Nazir suddenly someone will die, It's not something. It's something that might happen. Now, about that, Hashem knows what's going to happen if not. But the way David is set up in Teva, that it might happen or might not happen. So it says im. But when something is completely connected to Hashem, that Hashem has to do it, he knows whether he'll do it or not. And if he's planning to do it, he's going to do it. If he's not planning to do it, why say if this will happen? He knows it won't happen. It's up to him to do. So here, im, I'm just saying my own shot. I'm not saying it says this. But here, im has to be when, not if. You can't say if Hashem will be march. When if Hashem will be march. Will he or won't he? He knows what he's going to do. So here it means when. And sometimes im could mean when. And here it has to mean when Hashem will be marchib the gvul, then you will have more orem mikvot. And then the Rambam says, since it never happened, Hashem would not command to do something in vain if it's never going to happen. So obviously it's going to happen. So it means that we're going to get that to throw back. So here in order 4, the Rebbe says tzorich in ktsas, kasha, not a major kasha, but a kasha. How does the Rambam say that the raya is because Hashem does not command anything in vain unless it's actually going to happen? And the Gemara says in Sanhedrin that there are 2 things that never happened and never will happen. 2 halachas. Ben Seder Remeida Viranidachas. Ben Seder Remeida is the halachas of a rebellious son. When the Torah says what to do, etc., etc. Another din is Iranidachas, if the whole city worships idols, and the whole dinim that the Torah says. So the Gemara says, it did never happen, and it's not going to happen. So why did the Torah write it? Learn it, and you will get reward. The Torah put it in as a halachas that you should have more Torah. You should learn and get schar. So the Chura, we do see that David should give something, and it's not going to happen. How could David say it? Then the Rebbe says, "V'ula yesh l'chalik." Maybe we can make a difference between the case of the Orem Miklot and when Hashem said, "I'll widen the borders," and Hashem would not say it in vain, versus the other places of Ben Seder, Remeir, and Yadachas. The Rebbe doesn't say the chilik, doesn't say where the difference is, and he says, "Ula, maybe you should make a chalik." But obviously, it's not such a strong kasha because the Rebbe even starts off by saying tzorechim ktsas. You have to really understand because the difference is very clear. Now, Ben Seder Remeira, the halacha is a halacha. The halacha is that if a Ben Seder Remeira would happen, would be the din. So sometimes the Torah tells us halachas, even though physically more similar to what it says in Tanya, that we learn a Mishnah, for instance, Shnai Meiv and Betalis. 2 people coming holding the talis. This guy says, I found it. I found it. He says, it's mine. He says, it's mine. And all the dinim. Now, it's possible that such a case will never happen. Never happen, won't happen. That 2 people holding a towel, the Gemara says later, you're holding at the edges and the fringes. It's very possible it'll never happen. But it's no kasher. The Eibush is telling us what the din is. In other words, in Torah is the seichel of it. That if this would happen, the din would be so and so. So the Torah, that's kind of dreish v'kalvus schar. Learn it, you look at schar. By Ben Seir, Meir, and Nidachas. Here, the Eibush is telling us what to do. He's telling us you have to add 3 orem miklot. So if the Eibush says, I will broaden Eretz Yisrael. So he's telling us a fact. He's telling us a fact of what's going to happen. And he tells us what I want you to do. There it's not a fact. There he tells us, hey, halacha. If this and this happens, the halacha would be this. Might never happen. Fine. Might never happen. But here he's telling us, I'm going to do this. And I want you then, when I'll do it, to do 3 orem miklot. How could you say it's not going to happen? Then why would he tell us that this is what he's going to do? And you should have orem miklot. The mele, the kasha is not such a strong kasha. Maybe this could be the difference between the 2. Another point, the Rebbe brings the Rambam, where he says that the reason the Rambam brings the second raya, because when the first raya is only a raya for the Geula, but it's no raya for the person Mashiach. So one might time, the Pasuk says Hashem will return all the captives, the Eden will get back to Eretz Yisrael, fine. That's a Geula, it's a redemption. But where do we know there will be a Melech HaMashiach? So the second raya, in the Nevuah of Bilam, there he says the Psukim which refer to the person Melech HaMashiach. So in order 5, the Rebbe says that in Gemara Sanhedrin, we find an opinion of Reb Hillel. It's not Hillel, the original Hillel Azokan. It's a great grandson of him. Reb Hillel says, Ein lehem Mashiach leYisrael. There's no more Mashiach. Elo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rashi says, though, what it means is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimlech ba'atzmei v'yigalam levadei. The Eibishter himself is going to redeem them. Not a person Mashiach. So maybe Taka, there's an opinion like that. But the Rebbe brings here that when the Rambam says that definitely there will be a person Mashiach, is because the Chachamim pasken, all the Chachamim pasken not like the Hillel. So therefore, the Chassam Sefer says, if now, meaning after they pasken not like Reb Hillel, anybody who says like Reb Hillel is a kaifer b'chol ha'Torah kula. He's nice in the Torah because now it's off. Even though, let me just add that the words of Reb Hillel was part of Torah. It's in the Gemara. It's part of Torah. Reb Hillel was an Ameira. He was a great person. How could you say so? And we have a klal elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Whatever there's a machlekes in Gemara b'Shamai b'Hillel, even though we pass like b'Hillel, not like b'Shamai, and the Gemara even says divrei b'Shamai that in a Mishnah the words of b'Shamai against b'Hillel is not even considered a Mishnah. Nevertheless, we say elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They're both words of Hashem. So how does the Hillel fit in? So here we have to say that the beer of how this is true, still true, because when the Meida said it, is you could only be explained by Kabbalah. There's a ritva in the Erev and Daf Yud Gimel where it talks about the machlekes b'Shamai b'Hillel, and the Gemara says there that both, even though the halach is like one, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, they're both words of God, words of Hashem. So the Ritva says, in order to understand what elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim means, how it's possible that two opposite opinions should both be true, you have to learn Kabbalah, he says. You have to learn the secrets of the Torah. Kabbalah explains, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim means, since the Torah came down from the highest levels and went through Seder Ishtalshels, went through many levels, and each level it like transformed into that level, that till finally it came down to this world and it transformed into physical things. Torah talks about physical things, but there are Torah in every level. So even though down here in this level of this world, the halacha is like one, but nevertheless, could be in another world, the halacha is like the other. That's why in different stages, in different targets of the Torah, the halacha could be like the other one. So it could be in this, I'm saying again my own idea, maybe in a higher level, there the concept of the Geula Mashiach will be considered, it comes from the Eibishter himself, not connected to a person, whichever way, I don't know. But definitely Al Kabbalah would be true. But Lamaisa down here, we pass not like Reb Hillel, and anybody who says like Reb Hillel, because we pass not like him, is called, he says, as some Sefer says, a kaifer b'chol ha'Torah kula. Then I want to say something else, which is a question that I have. Rebbe says that the reason we give the second raya, the second raya is in order to show that there is a Bia Mashiach. Why do we need the first raya? Because the second raya, as much as it tells us about Mashiach, it's not clear in the Torah. It's in the Nevuah of Bilah, but he said it in the form of riddles, a form of other things that the Chazal say that Pshat means Mashiach. Rambam learns Pshat like that. But it's not clear. And the Rambam mentions that if you don't believe in Mashiach, you're going against things which are mefurish b'Torah, outright clearly in the Torah. So the second raya would not be enough because it's not so clear. That's why we still stick to the first raya, where there it's very clear that there'll be a geula. Hashem will return the captives. But my question is, so since the second raya adds that there will be a Mashiach, and that's not so clear, so where do we have the clarity in Torah, mefurish b'Torah, that there will be a Mashiach? When the Rambam seems that he's saying that anybody who doesn't believe him denies in the Torah because they are dvarim ha-mufurashim b'Torah. These are things which are mefurish in the Torah. But mefurish in the Torah is only Gula, but the Mashiach is not mefurish, the Rebbe says. So we know from the Chazal, we know the way they teach the psukim, and it's included in what the pasuk says, but it's not mefurish. So sof kol sof, the end, the inyan of Mashiach as a person is not mefurish in the Torah. So maybe Taka, that's not so important to be mefurish, because when the Gula is mefurish, and the Chazal tell us based on the psukim that it means that there will be a Mashiach, that could be considered to some degree mefurish. I don't know, could be mefurish into even Mashiach. It's not mefurish in Mashiach, but since the Geula is mefurish, and this is, we have the Chazal which darshan in Teresh Shabbat Peh, and they say it pshat in the pasuk, we could consider it mefurish. Maybe this is what the Rebbe means, but I am not clear. I can't say for sure. Another thing, when the Rebbe asks the Shaila on the Rambam, why does he write the third proof, the third raya in a separate halacha? So I just want to make clear that some people want to write that in this case it's not really a separate halacha. I'll tell you why. Because the Rambam didn't number the halachas. He didn't write halacha aleph, halacha, he didn't aleph, beis, gimel. He didn't do that. What the Rambam did was, if you look at the Kisvei Yad, the handwritten ksovim, I think even from the Rambam himself, you'll see that he has a halacha, then he leaves an empty space, and then he writes next halacha, another empty space. He didn't number them, but you could see from the way the spaces in between that this is a new halacha. In this case, I think they say that there is a space, but it's not clear if it's a big space or not. So maybe this is not a separate halacha. But obviously, the Rebbe learns, and probably the Rebbe saw the Ksav Yad, that the space does show it's a separate halacha. Besides that, it's printed as a separate halacha, but the space does show it's a separate halacha. And Mela, the kasha is, why does the Rambam write it in a separate halacha? And then the Rebbe gives the answer that this is a special, tells us something different, not just another ayah, but to tell us it's part of a mitzvah. Then another thing I want to say, that there is the Rebbe says that we don't find in the Torah a mitzvah to believe in Mashiach. So Mashiach is not connected to a mitzvah. So by bringing the Raif More Miklo, there we see it's connected to a mitzvah. Because we don't find in the Torah a tzivoy, a commandment to believe in the Gula. So the Rebbe says in Orah 16 here that that's one of the reasons why the Rambam does not say it in Sefer Hayad. Why in the beginning of the Rambam, which he writes the Yesodei HaTorah, the foundations of the Torah, he doesn't write there about Mashiach? Why not? It's a foundation. We know it's from the Yud Gimel Ikrim. It's from the 13 principles. So when he writes the first section, which is Hilchas Yesodei HaTorah, the halachas of the foundation of Torah, why doesn't he write the Rambam Mashiach? So the Rebbe brings here from the Reish Hamuna, this is the Lashon. In his Sefer Mishnah Torah, he wants to write only to explain the mitzvahs that will be commanded. So Hevi Hilchas Yesodei Torah Levayil Eisem HaYesodei Sheyesh B'chlol Mitzvah. He brings the foundation of Torah, which has a mitzvah, but he doesn't bring all the Yesodas, not all the foundations of Torah, which means not all the main principles of Torah are written in Hilchas Yesodei Torah. Only those that are connected to mitzvah, not just things that we have to believe in. You have to believe in Chiyas HaMeisim. Doesn't bring Yesodei Torah about Chiyas HaMeisim, and it's a foundation, it's a principle in Torah, because he only brings the halachas. And therefore, since there's no mitzvah to believe in Mashiach, so that's why he doesn't bring it there. Then another thing here, which is from Ahora, Rebbe was medayik, that the Rambam says the Loshen, that Hashem said, Ki yarchav Hashem alekecha, you should add 3 other miklot, and the Loshen, v'lei tziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'teyu. And Hashem did not command anything in vain. So the Rebbe said, so the Rambam is trying to bring out from here that obviously there will be a time for sure that Mashiach will come and we'll have to have a miklot. And the Rebbe learns pshat that this makes it into a part of a mitzvah. So the Rebbe explains when the Rambam says the Loshen v'lei tziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'teyu, Hashem didn't command. By a commandment, it's even more important that it can be in vain, because a commandment means a mitzvah. So the Rebbe in the Orah says, Obifrat, especially, that l'chura, why did the Rambam have to bring the raya from Moreh Miklot? He could have brought the first part of the Pasuk. The Pasuk says that Hashem is going to broaden the borders of Eretz Yisrael and give us back Eretz Yisrael. That's it. Isn't that a raya Mashiach will come? Isn't that a raya that will be a gula? Because it never happened yet. It never happened that he gave us back Eretz Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael bigger. It never happened. So obviously it's going to happen. That means it will be a gula. Why does the Rambam not bring that raya? He says that Hashem commanded us to Miklot. He said that when Hashem will give us back the land bigger, there's a mitzvah of Miklot. And he wouldn't command us the mitzvah of Miklot in vain. What's the gate to the mitzvah of Miklot? If he wants to use this as a raya for the coming of Mashiach, he should say Hashem said that it'll be the soul given back and it'll be bigger, and it never happened yet. So the Rebbe said, because the Rambam is not just trying to bring a raya for Mashiach. If you want to bring just a raya for coming of Mashiach, that would be a raya. A raya that there will be a gola. We see Hashem says he's going to give back Eretz Yisrael and we're going to get it even bigger. He wants to tell us that this is part of a mitzvah, so he has to bring the raya from the fact that it's a mitzvah or a miklot, and Hashem would not give the mitzvah in vain. Is a raya that is going to happen. And what this does is, this makes the end of the gula as part of a mitzvah. Then one more thing I would like to say is when the Rebbe says here that the union of the Vua is something, has a chumrah, and that is that it's given to people, so it's closer. When it comes from the people's side, it's closer. So the Rebbe brings here in the Order 52 that explains there why the Rambam connects the union of Torah in Kutasichat. Rebbe explains with the union of Nevuah of Moshe. That the Torah that we have came from Moshe Rabbeinu, and that he connects it to the Nevuah of Moshe. That's why another Novi can't come and contradict him. Whatever, all the, why is Negei it's Nevuah of Moshe? Torah is Torah from the Eibishter. Rambam wants to tell us the same thing there. The mile of Torah is that Torah has also generally a union of Nevuah. But in this case, it's specifically, this is a union of Nevuah. And since it's a union of Nevuah, it has a mile of Nevuah. Also, in Bemela, it comes out that it has a mile of being promised by Hashem, mile of being part of Torah, mile of part of a mitzvah, and it's also part of Nevuah. So the union of Mashiach is so strong. And this is one of the things that the Rambam tells us, according to the Rebbe's Chat, what we have to believe in. And if a person doesn't believe in any of these things, is like the Rambam says, is Kefer b'Meshe, Torah b'Meshe, and all the different things. And we know that by believing in it, and not only believing in it, but waiting for him, is going to bring Mashiach. It says when the Eden ask for Mashiach, that's when the Eibishter will bring Mashiach. That's why they ever push so much that we have to ask for Mashiach. Now the Eibishter knows. People say, what do you have to ask for? The Eibishter knows when Mashiach comes. He said, we want Mashiach now. Why do you have to ask? Well, first of all, if you have that question, then why half of the davening goes off? Because half of the davening is about it. But I want to mention one more thing that there is there. Chofetz Chaim writes in his Pirush and Tefillah that why do we have to ask for Mashiach? He says, because there's a din that if a person works, you got to pay him right away. You can't hold back the salary of a person. And if you do hold back, you're over on the lav, like solin, whatever. And the din is, when are you over on the lav? When do you transgress an avera? If you don't give back on time, only if he asks for it. So he says that's why we have to ask for Mashiach, because that, like so to speak, pushes the Eibishter. He's waiting for it, because if you ask me, then I have to do it. And if we'll ask, the Eibishter will take and do it. And it will bring Mashiach very, very soon. And we hope it will be very, very soon. Because of Mamish, as we daven in davening and we ask for Mashiach, and we do it even in English, as we say, we want Mashiach now.